Hello everyone, Ragewood here, back with another Godforge video. In this video we're going to be taking a quick peek and reacting to some of the things pointed out in the most recent Fateless podcast with Susie and Corey. And at the very end we're going to give our thoughts on a little spicy drop that Simon gave us, I believe yesterday, on reaching 30,000 beta tester signups. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, as I always do, I will put the link to the podcast episode in the description down below, so if you want to watch it without hearing my spiel over the top, you can. I'm not going to be watching the entire thing here, we're just going to be going through little bits that I've written down already, and just give a comment on those. So I'll go grab the headphones, we'll unmute this, and we'll jump into it. So for a very quick, too long, didn't read kind of thing, Corey is a watcher of Realms, content creator, big fan of anime. He's got lots of tattoos, I think he said, on his right arm, dedicated different things like that, and overall just seems like a pretty cool dude. So as you just saw pop up on the screen there, definitely go check him out.
Kind of ramp up the progression. Like, for example, if you're playing Watcher and you unfortunately pull Azhor, which is like a tank.
He is also known as Arshor because he sucks. Anyway.
You're not really going to be able to do much with him overall, but he's still going to provide a stun. He's still going to provide some form of CC. So what Godforge should kind of look for is essentially have every unit have some form of viability, even if it is just a minor form of CC. Like, for example, if the tank is going to be on the weaker side, or if the marksman is going to be on the stronger side, kind of try to find a way for your content to either support it or kind of have some struggles against it. Like, for example, even with, and I'm bringing out random units here, but if a person was to pull a Praetus in Watcher of Realms, there's certain things that you can't really use Praetus for. Even though he's a Lord hero, he's a magic damage hero that does true damage, he's not going to be super viable for Gear Raid 3.
Cool, so a couple of things to sort of point out there. 100% agree in that all heroes should be viable somewhere in any game. I think that will also make a lot of heroes evergreen. So if you take City of Sintranos in Rage, you're going to need lots and lots of different heroes to go through different rooms in Sintranos. Now, I personally have never played it, but I am aware of its existence. So yes, a legendary hero might put up 100% decrease, or might put up decrease attack 100% of the time, but you could have rares and epics that do it 75%, 50%. So yes, they're not the best, but they're still viable. So then as players, there is a lot less of the whole sort of feels bads when you get some of these heroes. So that is definitely one thing that Godforge should be doing, and if I'm being honest, probably are going to do. And that also works the other way. You know, you don't want a silver bullet in any game. They did a podcast with, I can't remember the gentleman's name, a couple of weeks ago, where they were basically just saying, like, it's the same 5 people all the time in Watcher of Realms. You know, we'll have Constance, we'll have, you know, these other 4 people to do all the content. Now, Praetus, I believe, is a very, very good hero in Watchers, but as Corey's just said, he's not good in Gear Raid 3. Well, that's great, you know, because you don't want to have, again, those heroes which can do everything and make everyone else obsolete. So it's going to be a very hard balancing act, but you definitely want, you know, that balance, and that's going to be the key thing for Brad, Saphira, and all the other game designers are going to be working hard on to get right.
That's a tough thing,
right?
in designing in this genre. Is everybody, you know, when a player is new, they're like, I want a legendary, you know, and so you gotta like, you want like players to experience acquiring a legendary fairly early in their journey. And then the double-edged sword of that is if a player is getting legendaries early, now it can make the or it can shorten the leash that you have with the progression phase of uncommons and rares. Because like, well, I already have a legendary, so screw those guys. Like I'm just gonna build this. So
Mhm.
yeah, but back when Raid launched, it was like it was pretty common to not get a legendary until what, like 2 or 3 weeks in. So you had a pretty long phase because I believe they had like the login reward of Shaman and like an epic. But you like, I mean, my first legendary was probably like 2 or 3 weeks in.
Yeah, and that's the same with like Dragonair. Like people came into that game expecting instant legendaries, and it wasn't that generous with their original system either. So I don't know. I feel like nowadays there's so many gachas that have come and gone that people expect a legendary in the first day if they're gonna grind, and if they don't get it, they're confused. I really do think that seems to be a weird new expectation. At least if you're a very crazy grinder, you know, the people that on the day one of launch are playing for 8 hours, they expect to get a legendary. And I think if they don't, they'll be disappointed. I don't know. I really have noticed that trend in comments and the games. I've played so many other gachas since playing Raid, and it's interesting to see that change when we're so familiar with that.
Because you do want like that dopamine rush of like, am I gonna get it? Am I not? And you want like, oh my god, it actually happened. But then you also don't want to screw people over and have them be like, are you kidding me? I grinded so hard, I was so active, I put in all this work, and now I get nothing for it. Screw this game. So really hard to kind of walk that line and play that balance. Would you have any tips on things you've seen where it's done well, where they maintain that? Okay, cool. Go ahead.
Absolutely. So I know this sounds weird, but like I'm a huge anime fan, right? Like my whole right arm is just dedicated to different animes that I like. So there's a game called, and it's still active, it's called Bleach Brave Souls. And most people like don't know about it. It's like a very niche community, niche game, but it's also a gotcha. And so how it functions is just about every, I believe 14 days, and they have banners like constantly kind of running through. But every 14 days they do a story mission that you go ahead and essentially kind of run through. It's pretty long, maybe take like 20, 30 minutes, right? And then if you're going to go ahead and complete it for the reward, takes about 2 hours in total, just kind of focusing on the game. But you have 14 days for it. At the end of the whole progression cycle of that storyline, you get one legendary summon. But the thing is, the legendary summon is essentially guaranteed to go ahead and give you a legendary. It doesn't specify which legendary, and mind you, there's a pool of like 1,000 of them, right? But 14 days of you being dedicated, completing the content, there you go. You get the chance to get a legendary. Um, One of the things that Watcher does is, I think after you complete stage 18 for every single one of them, you get a divine
Oh yeah, I
summon.
love that.
Yeah, and that's helpful. And then also for
Your
Watcher, one of
reset
the,
card.
yeah, I think so.
And for
And
people that don't know, is divine summon like a
Oh, not
random
reset.
legendary?
yeah, divine summon's like a
Or that.
6% chance or something like that. And then faction trials, that's where you get the guaranteed Lego.
That's what
And
I was thinking of. Yeah, the card. Yeah.
Would
yeah,
it be realistic to like make a new account and rush to that point and see who you get? And if it's bad, make a new account and okay.
no
Oh.
chance. No chance. You'd have to.
So what sort of Corey was describing there to me sounds a lot like the apprentice pass or the forge pass that you get in Raid, or in Dragon if you've played season 1 since they made those changes, where you have like a week-long period where you have so many missions that you need to complete, and at the end of that period you get Sharlak. Now I think those are really good personally, for two reasons. They sort of give you direction on where to go in the game. If you've never played this game before, or any games, catch games, anything like this, you know, it can be a bit confusing on how to do it. So I like those where it's like, oh, do this, do this, do this, do this. Here's a little reward. Do this, do this, do this. Here's another reward. It will keep you engaged and sort of gives you direction and guidance on how to go. And at the end of it, you get a legendary. So as Brad was saying, you know, you're giving players that sort of dopamine hit. They're like, oh wow, that's so cool. I got this guy. And everyone's getting the same one. So it's not like a case of, oh, you've got to, you know, I'll re-roll in case I get better luck. You're still getting that same one no matter what you do. So it keeps it fair for everybody. Now, you're always going to have the whole RNG, which I've seen in the recent raid free to play, where I'm getting a load of ass heroes and people are putting void legendaries, warlords on their first hour. You know, you're always going to get that, and you're never going to prevent re-rolling because of that. But from giving people a legendary and keeping them enticed, I think those sort of like weekly passes are a good way to do it. Another way you could do it, or Godforge could do it, is similar to what they do in Hearthstone. Now, Hearthstone is a card game, a lot like Magic the Gathering, you know, Pokemon, made by Blizzard, and it's huge. The way they do it, at the start of every new release, you are guaranteed a legendary within your first 10 pack openings. That was 5, so we're going to do that twice just to show 10. First 10 pack openings, you are guaranteed a legendary. After that, it goes back to its normal rates. Now, that is good and bad. That's great because, again, you're giving players the dopamine hit, happy days. But as Brad's alluded to, and he's going to allude to later, the problem with that is people will then just spend 2 hours re-rolling accounts until they get something decent or something that they like, and then ploughing on from there. I'm personally not against that. If that's what you want to do, you go for it, son. So I haven't got the time myself, and I get bored of redoing the same old content over and over, personally. So if the Fateless want to disincentivize re-rolling, then all you got to do is find somewhere along the line where you make it far enough away that it's inconvenient to re-roll, but not too far where they're just like, screw this kind of thing. You want to make it a bit of a task for them to re-roll. That's how I personally would look at going around the whole Lego cycle getting unlucky.
That's kind of similar to how Pokemon TCG Pocket is right now, where what people do is they go ahead and they start a new account, they don't link it, and they'll just play all the way through really quick. The story missions take about 2 hours if you're good. You see what packs you get. If you get a good pack, you keep your account. If you don't, you delete it. And then you repeat the
Re-rolling,
cycle.
yeah, that's quite
Exactly.
popular.
What would
And
be
so
on that point? What would be your perspective, both of you, on re-rolling? Like, is it something gamers like? Is it kind of cool? Should it be rewarded? Like, hey, if somebody wants to put in the effort of re-rolling 50 accounts, you know, and they get Duchess, you know, kudos to them. Or do we want to decentivize re-rolling because people don't want to? Oh, I don't want to be forced to re-roll just because it's optimal. Like, screw that. I just want to create my account and go. What would be kind of the sweet spot or the perspective on that?
Oh my gosh, I'm so torn on that one personally. I love it and I hate it at the same time. I have to say, I I think it's better when a game gives you enough to work with to where you feel like there's no need to reroll. Like if there's some starter champs that are fun and there's enough summons to where you get a couple things, like a couple good epics, or like yeah, there's maybe a 7-day login that's amazing and oh my gosh, once I can't wait to get that character, so we're all gonna be fine. I feel like if there's enough there that makes you feel like you've got a solid start, then there's no need to reroll, period. It's preferred. But in a game like ours where there's gonna be hundreds of characters, I feel like rerolling is gonna happen if we allow for a legendary within the first hour at most. I hope people aren't crazy enough to reroll like 3 hours and 4 hours of gameplay.
Susie,
And
come
then,
on. Susie, come on.
I
People
know
are
they
gonna
do,
re-roll
but
it.
but min-maxers are like 20 minutes reroll done, you know, like or don't at all. That's how if I can't reroll in like 20 minutes, I'm not rerolling.
I'm
Yeah,
the
there's
same way.
absolutely people that are gonna sit here with like 2 monitors, 8 things of blue
Yeah.
stacks,
That's
clicking
so
through
true, you're
it.
right.
Absolutely.
I think with Godforge, I think if you have like really good units all around, right? They're fairly balanced, and mind you, it's impossible to go ahead and say like Occam's razor. Oh, the solution to no re-rolling is just make sure that everything is good, everything is balanced. It's not going to happen. Re-rolling is going to happen. It's almost like a pseudo necessary thing people are going to do if they feel dissatisfied with the units that they get. I think the thing is though, if you go ahead and have units that are within some variance of, oh, this unit is going to be good for this type of content, this unit is going to be good for this type of content. If a person is able to go ahead and get so and so unit, as long as they feel like, okay, now I can go ahead and progress in this type of content without having some significant hiccups because I'm lacking this other hero and I wouldn't be able to push this content, that's fine because people are going to kind of want some form of challenge. It's going to feel nice where, oh, I'm talking to my buddy and it's like, I'm able to go ahead and push stage 21 in this, but I can't push stage 21 in this. Okay, I need to go play the game or kind of progress in the stage that I'm currently in so that eventually I can go ahead and gear up and do the stage 21 for this other thing.
Yeah, there you go. So they've touched on a few things there. As you say, you can't have every hero be balanced and good at everything to disincentivize rerolling because then the game would be boring. So that's definitely not going to happen. You know, as Susie said and Corey a few times, if the heroes have a good niche somewhere in the game where you can go, right, okay, I suck at Dragon's Lair, but I can actually go push Fire Knight because I've got Allure and Aethel and Apothecary, then fine, I will focus there, we'll come back to the other stuff later. I think that is another nice way of moving around it. And I do think what I said is another way of doing it. Say, put the reroll far enough away to disincentivize it, but not too much of an inconvenience if you did want to do it.
Do you like to, or what do you feel is a good place to get stuck? Like you've grinded for hours and then, oh my gosh, I got stuck. Okay, good. I have a challenge now. Like, where do you have a feeling of like, when is it too soon to already feel like you hit that wall versus, like, yay, it's a challenge?
Yeah, I feel
Some
like
interesting, right?
it's actually a good question because I think within Raid, one of the things that I like is it almost felt like every single stage had a percent difficulty increase, right? But it didn't seem like impossible. If anything, Ice Golem like 5 versus like 6, maybe like a 5% difference, right? It's very marginal. But if you're looking at Ice Golem 5 compared to like 20, you're looking at it like, okay, like this is insane. Like this is actually kind of hard. This is difficult content. I think if you're playing the game, I would say once you're within 2 weeks of playing it, that's when the game should kind of get difficult. And the reason why I say 2 weeks is because ideally, and this will kind of take some user testing, but if you're spending 2 hours a day or 1 hour a day, what does that look like? How far do you push based on the units that you get? And you kind of have to do kind of like a massive spreadsheet as to, okay, if you get these combination of units, you can push here. And so you can kind of get a good idea as to what your overall user experience is going to be. And for example, I think with Watcher of Realms, it's very hero dependent. And even then, whenever you're late game, it's also hero dependent. And so what I mean by that is with Watcher, ideally you kind of get stuck with content when you get to like chapter 8, which I believe is like the
For
Calypso.
sure.
Yeah, the Calypso stage where she basically one-shots your tanks. If you don't properly place everything. So that's one part, right? And so that's going to be fun because you get to play about 7 campaign chapters and then you get hit with this wall. No one likes a wall if it's just absolutely insurmountable and it kind of breaks the game where, oh, I need to go ahead and stop playing for or not stop playing, but stop kind of grinding the game. I need to focus on this specific piece of content for the next like 3 weeks, right? Because then it's just kind of like a RuneScape grind, right? You're doing these things to have the numbers go up. Some people like that. I personally do. Most people don't though. So even with that, you kind of beat that hump, but it kind of took you away from enjoying the actual aspects of the game, and you're forced to look at these little nuances such as I don't know if Susie does this, but for certain content like Guild Boss 2 Semra, it's not uncommon for people to 1x speed it and then click a unit so that you go from the normal speed of the game to looking at like frame per frame per frame per frame of the
Yeah,
game
always.
just so you can beat the content, right? Because
Great.
that's a stuck mechanic, right? Where everything is almost I can't beat it unless I'm being very, very, very like hyper particular about what I'm trying to do. I had the units for it, I had the gear for it. So I feel like with Godforge, go ahead.
Oh, no,
Okay, I feel like with Godforge, what you guys could possibly introduce is I almost think about it like a progression tier list of like, okay, I'm increasing the difficulty by 5%, but that 5% is either HP or it's either speed or it's either defense, something marginal each time to where overall, like the content is getting stronger, content is getting more difficult, but ideally, as you complete the content more and more, it gives you the resources to go ahead and continue with it. No one wants to do 500 stages of one particular thing and then still be stuck on the stage that they're trying to go ahead and move on to. So,
I think it's ironic because it was also the same in Raid. It was stage 8 because that was where you had to face Force
That's true.
Affinity, Bad Alcazar. It was the same. I wonder if there's some sort of research that shows that at stage 8 is like when we should have a first wall.
I bet this
honestly,
has
yeah.
something to do with the time of play. Maybe like if someone's grinding like crazy for the first day or well, a few hours every day, like how many hours on average does it take for a person to get to that point? And is that the point where players will drop off if they get too frustrated or not? Or do they want,
Mhm.
they want a little bit of a challenge? Like, okay, if you're just doing campaign because you know that's the first thing you should do, and you just keep doing it until you get stuck, you don't want that to be like 20 chapters. That'd be get monotonous. You need to get stuck to where you're forced to go to a dungeon and try to get some gear. You're forced to go to get some experience or gold or whatever the hell the game needs. I feel like there's definitely the need to get stuck, but that's the question of how early is like the ideal. And I think you're right. I think like the first difficulty of a campaign mode, being able to do most of it within your first grind is great, but you maybe not complete the whole thing before there's a decent challenge. I think that seems pretty
Mean
consistent
on like
across
the
the other
base
games I've
difficulty?
played.
Like you mean
Yeah,
like
like
normal?
normal.
Yeah.
I think Raid maybe, I don't know. I guess similar in King Arthur as well. Like it gets hard pretty early. I would say even earlier than that. But I think as long as you take a pause, you go do a few more of whatever new dungeon. Okay, or you do campaign. You get to the end of chapter 3, you unlock something new. So you farm a tiny bit of that something new, which pushes you past where you were just stuck on chapter 3 to get to chapter 4. And then same thing, you go through chapter 4 and unlock something new. And each little thing is designed to perfectly progress you if you put in that nice flow of gameplay that the game intends you to. I think it's kind of if it's set up nicely like that, I think it's fun. And then definitely some special challenges though where you really have to think. I think that's true too. You don't want to have money. That's the other thing, right? Money. You just pull out the wallet, buy as many legendaries as you can in the form of summoning instantly. Then no content is hard and you can just do it nonstop. You don't want that either. There has to be some skill involved as well, I think. Balancing where you can't just throw a DPS at it too.
So, lots to take in, and that was quite a long little stint there because I think it was quite important. So, Corey mentioned 2 weeks is probably where the roadblock should be. I'm with Susie in that I think it'd be better off to do almost like hours played, almost, because if you're a full-time content creator or you happen to have a week off work when the game drops and you can afford to grind it all the time, 2 weeks is a long time before you get stuck, and as this title says, easy might be boring if you're just flying through it all with no roadblocks at all. It's just like, when's the fun start in some cases? So rather than 2 weeks, try and work out, which is going to be an impossible metric, I know, but try and work out how often can the average player play our game. If it's 1 hour a night, if it's 2 hours a night, something like that, and then do that 2 weeks. So that might be in the first 24 total hours of gameplay is when you reach your first hump. I quite like that. I think that's a sort of a good way to perhaps go about it. Something else they talked about is most players will start off in the campaign because that is where the game will sort of guide you to go to begin with. Now, something that was mentioned in a podcast, which I think Dirk was in, I can't remember where else there was, but they were discussing about tutorials and how much hand holding there should and shouldn't be. And they were going off the basis of they'll let you just play and do what you want until you get stuck and hit that roadblock, and then there'll be maybe a tooltip that comes up and says, oh, perhaps you should go farm some gear. And then it will take you to the dungeon, you'll go get your gear, and then great, you can get past that little roadblock. As Susie sort of scented, and you'll go through campaign 4 or whatever stage, unlock something new, or you get stuck. Like, try and design it in a way where it almost forces you to then go look at other areas of the game, or say just let players go ham, and then once they can't beat something, then say perhaps try this, which I think was the avenue they were potentially looking at going down with the tutorial from that podcast. I think it was the same one with Dane, Dirk, and Brad, where they dropped achievements and imprints, I think, where they were discussing sort of how much hand holding there should or should not be.
Because in the vein of progress or progression, gold and resources is also a very big part of that, right? For leveling your heroes, upgrading your gear, artifacts, things like this. How do you guys plan on addressing that? Because there's two very jarring spectrums, right? You have the raid spectrum of I'm going to drop 1 mil to go ahead and re-gear my hero, and then the watcher perspective of, hey, it's free. Go make 20 gear plans, swap it around every single minute for each piece of content. We're even going to auto save your gear for specific pieces of content without you even having to worry about it. So, do you guys have a plan for at least gold spendage, and then also for XP leveling your heroes? Because once again, the difference between raid and watcher is very different, right? The process for leveling your heroes and starting them up in Watcher is very, I would say, user friendly, and kind of, you don't have to think about it, right? You press a button, you press another button. If you have the XP, done, right? You don't have to kind of manually run through those units in a campaign dungeon to get them XP to eventually turn them into fodder, right? So, do you guys have a plan for that yet?
Sure. As far as like the leveling and the XP, obviously all the stuff is still fluid and is gonna iterate and change. But we'll probably be somewhere in the middle, between like
Awesome.
raid and watcher in terms of how much you play and grind versus how immediately you can just click a button and level up. It'll be somewhere balanced in there, I would think.
So that I find interesting. Now, the answer that Brad's given is very vague and has not confirmed or denied anything. And I actually did a podcast with the guys yesterday where I asked a lot of, let's call them very difficult questions that I did not expect to get an answer to, and I didn't for some of them, and that's okay. Because they're being very political in what they're saying, or not promising anything, because if they say something now, they have to commit to it, which is bad because they might then think of something different, or maybe a community member suggests something, and then they're like, oh my god, that's amazing, we should definitely do that. But then they go, but we can't do that because we already said we're going to be doing this. So that's why they're not going to confirm or deny anything at this stage. Watcher of Realms, there is a gold dungeon, there is an XP dungeon. You go farm that, it drops lots of that particular resource, and then you would go level your heroes like you would in Raid and all that kind of stuff. Whereas Raid, you have to farm those campaign stages over and over and over again, and it doesn't save it automatically. There's RNG involved where sometimes you lose, and then you've just wasted your energy. So I think I prefer the Watcher method, unless once you have done, if you do it like Raid, where you farm a campaign level, once you have completed it and you've done it, it will save that recording, and then when you want to go farm XP, you will then just run that 20, 30 times. Sure, you might have to wait rather than have it instantly going, right, you've done it 30 times, here's your XP. You might have to wait the sort of the 10 seconds or whatever it is, but rather than going actually in the game, almost have it, I guess, in the background or something like that. Now, that is potentially a way they do it. Once you've completed the content or the campaign run, you can then just like auto farm it. That's the only way that I can think that potentially they might be going in that sort of middle realm. I personally prefer the watcher method, especially from a gold dungeon point of view.
And then
Awesome.
your other question, I believe, was about gear swapping, right? Like, is it going to cost? Is it going to be free? Okay. So that's, I can't even tell you how many hours we've spent discussing that internally, obviously. But I don't believe like Simon has leaked that system yet in terms of how we're handling gearing, but I think it's going to be super exciting. I think we found a good solution in that kind of discussion because there's a few different ways to think about it. Like, everybody wants free gear swapping, obviously. But then what we want to avoid is like, oh, I'm just gonna farm one good set of DPS gear and I'm just gonna swap it around, and now I'm done grinding. But we also don't want people to feel like
True.
this game's pay to win because just to move around gear, I gotta spend half my currency. So I think we've got some good ideas that are going to help kind of innovate, and there's no perfect solution that'll make everybody happy, but I think we do have a fun system that Simon's probably going to be doing a video about within a month or two, probably.
Awesome.
Good.
Now that is exciting that the video is going to come. But as they've all sort of alluded to here, the free gear swapping, no free gear swapping debate is very polarizing. And you either fall on one side of the fence or the other. There is no middle ground from what I've seen in various communities. I personally have always fell on the free gear swapping side of the fence. And playing the Raid free-to-play series that I'm now, 7 or 8 days in a way has sort of confirmed it to me. Like, some of those missions where you've got to put attack percent gloves on this hero, where it incentivizes bad gear builds firstly more than anything else, is so annoying, especially early on when silver is a premium. But again, that comes to perhaps horrendous game economy more than anything else. But I can see where they're coming from as well, where you don't want late game players just to farm one good set, job done. You want to encourage players to keep playing the game. At least, I suppose retention or time in the game is going to be a very important metric for Fateless. So I've been thinking about it a lot, and later on in the podcast, I'm not going to show you, Corey mentions that he actually likes or enjoys the fact that he sees his resources dropping and then going back up. And perhaps he's on his own. And he's definitely not. And then Susie mentions that Dirk dropped that he wanted us all to be broke all the time and people kicked off. I was one of those people who was ready to fight Dirk on a hillside that day. That really annoyed me. But it could be just the way that it came across. Having played then this Raid free-to-play series, I would do it on a level-based system, an account level-based system. So right now, we've got a 4-day window where gear swapping is free, and that is amazing for all of us right now. You can clear some missions, it makes things a lot easier. I would do it on an account level system. So I think I'm level 42, 43. Like, we've flown through, and still gear swapping will be a pain. So what I would do is, let's say you get to level 60. Level 60 and onwards is when gear swapping will then cost currency of some description. And rather than having a raid gear swapping day and avoiding people from just hovering around 59, because you still want them to play the game, when they hit level 60, they then have like a 3-day window. Be like, right, you'll still gain XP, you now have 3 days remaining to swap gear, get all your builds where they need to be, and then after that, it will then cost you money. Because by that point, they'll be able to do dungeons to a reasonably high level to generate that income of resources, both gold and XP, and whatever else Godforge uses. That is one option to do it. The other option they have, I think, alludes to an attunement system, which has been mentioned, where they sort of went off the idea that gear swapping would be free the entire time, but then you could affix gear to a particular hero to get certain benefits. Now, I'm not going to spoil the podcast that I just did, but we do briefly talk about that in that podcast, which will be out next week, I think, at the time of recording this. But yeah, I would say a very political, non-conformant answer from Brad there for that reason. And having fallen on the side of the fence of free gear swapping, I would now look at it as an account level threshold. Once you reach a certain point, it will then start costing. That's how I would tackle it personally. Right, very long sort of dribble from myself there, going over these couple of things, so I do apologise. The rest of the podcast, they're talking a little bit about King Arthur, and then they ask Corey what his god, myth, or legend he would like in the game, and he does give his answer too. I'm not going to comment on that. You should go check out the podcast yourself and go get that answer. Anyway, so with that bit out of the way, let's go take a look at the 30,000 beta test sign up. Surprise that Simon gave us. So if we hop over to the Discord and we go to the announcements page, we have a Ganesha concept. Now this is exciting for two reasons. So he is the second Svarga hero revealed to us, but he's also the first one of it revealed officially. Now, I have seen it one Svarga hero dropped in one of the videos and in the PowerPoint presentation, which I have got on my website, which I think might have been Ravana. But nothing, I think, has actually officially been dropped when it comes to 2D concepts, that kind of thing. I think it was just sort of shown in a video and then sort of breezed past. I could be wrong, but if I'm not wrong, and it was shown to us, this is definitely the first confirmed legendary. And it is Ganesha. So before we get into it, let's just have a quick Google search. Now, the AI answer tells us that he's a Hindu god with the head of an elephant, body of a human, and the god of new beginnings, wisdom, luck, and the remover of obstacles. He's the son of Shiva and Parvati, god of destiny, karma, intellectual thought, lots of other things here. He's pot-bellied, often depicted holding sweets, with a snake around his waist, and has 4 arms riding a mouse. If we go to Wikipedia, a lot of that is confirmed here. He is readily identified by his elephant head and 4 arms, widely revered, more specifically as the remover of obstacles and bringer of good luck. He's a patron of arts and science, and the deva of intellect and wisdom. As the god of new beginnings, he is honoured at the start of rites and ceremonies, and etc., etc. Parvati and Shiva, again written down there, so a well-known god, a hugely well-known god, revered in the Hindu sort of religion, I guess. Definitely come and check this out. But as you can see here, very common. We're seeing lots of similar things here. So if we go back to the 2D concept, they've basically nailed a lot of these on the head. Saturn Lotus Flower, I have seen that before. We do have the 4 arms. We've got the snake here that's sort of coiling around his back and coming around the front here. He is pot-bellied, a man after my own heart, and has 4 arms and elephant head. I think this looks wicked. It looks very, very cool, and I am excited to see how they go with him as the god of sort of new beginnings and things like that. I wouldn't even know where to start. But I imagine New Beginnings, possibly an Invoker, that sort of support class that we have seen in Godforge, with a Revive maybe. You would think New Beginnings, people being reborn, at least that's the way that I sort of perceive it, although once again I'm not a game designer. Now, the Svarga faction, they are sort of, or it's been mentioned, they are doing last, mainly because of the difficulty involved in the rigging and the movement. A lot of them have like 1,000 heads, 4 arms, and 8 legs, and that is a lot of work compared to sort of your normal human running along. But it's exciting to see that they are now working on some of these, and I cannot wait to, actually we'll just do it now, seeing as we've got it up. I cannot wait to screenshot that and get that on the website. So yeah, that was exciting. That was a cool thing to see, and yeah, bring on the rest of the Pantheon. So I'm just going to finish that on here. That seems like a good way to end off, guys. So a bit of a long one again today. Thank you for sticking with me on it. Next week, I will be the podcast guest, I believe, so do go check that out. Whether I do a react to my own podcast, I don't know. Maybe I should, just to clarify a few things and my thoughts. Obviously, they're all busy people, and we only had like an hour, so perhaps I'll just give a bit more input on some of my answers, their responses, once I've had time to sort of rewatch and go over it again. And you will, of course, see me back with you on Tuesday, covering the Tuesday video that comes out. I think it was mentioned in the general Discord that Susie's going to be doing it this week because Simon, Dan, presumably, some of the other guys are going to be at Pocket Gamer. So the other people are stepping in, and I'm excited to see what they discussed. Looking at the questions that were put in the Discord, there are some juicy ones, so perhaps we'll get a few little leaks or spoilers from them. Anyway, take care, look after yourselves, work hard, but as always, play harder, and I'll see you in another one soon. Cheers.